You see here, kid? You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before. You just gotta bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump. And you might think, what if I fall? Well, what if you don't? What if you fly?
Switching command to internal.
From the Collaborative Studios, Open the Eye, where metaphysical, paranormal, and the unexplained meet. Open the Eye with Tanya Tyler.
In 1905, Albert Einstein birthed the most famous equation to the world, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Energy and mass are interchangeable. Now, according to the National Institute of Health, in 1931, the exchange of letters between Einstein and Freud about instinct and survival, war and peace. Einstein, we can succeed to the degree that we understand and become reconciled with individual collective past and accept our flawed and often forgotten common humanity. The more we are at peace within ourselves, the more we can make peace with each other. In 1955, Einstein died, leaving this physical world, entering the spirit world. Some say that spirits can help us more on the other side. We live in a time that it's crucial for world peace. What would Einstein say about world peace now? Someone that is connected to Einstein, who channels Einstein, Barbara With, international peace activist, award-winning author, and psychic channel to Albert Einstein and the party, working in Afterlife for world peace. Barbara, before you started channeling Einstein, you were a musician. When did music start for you?
Started playing piano when I was 5, and I started writing music when I was 12. So by the time I was out of high school, I had 2 sets of original material. And for 20 years, that's what I did. And when I came in off the road is when I started to channel. And a friend died, and that was really when I started to channel. But I went back on the road half-heartedly for another 5, 6, 7 years, and then it just all shifted to a different way that I use music now. I'm not on the road singing. It's a tough life.
Yeah, you're doing another kind of song. You're channeling, which is impressive. So let's back you up a little bit and talk about your friend passes.
He was a dear, dear friend and mentor. I think the first time that he came to me was audio. I heard him talking in my ear because I was steeped in the world of this stuff anyway. I started to see a channel when I was about 16, so I knew what the world was about.
Did you have this when you were a child?
Not per se. I think it was the music expression of it that happened in the first part of my life, because it's the same process. To write a song for me is the same process as channel Einstein. I'm just listening for something different.
And so you weren't really aware of anything as a child. You started noticing it at what age?
Well, it was a definitive moment when I began to actually channel. Prior to that, I had been reading tarot cards for 10 years. I'd been going to my mentor in Minneapolis for 10 years, and she channeled. And so when I started to automatic write, it didn't, I mean, it was surprising, but I knew exactly what it was, but I was just shocked that I was doing it. So it was kind of a line of demarcation, but so much came in life. And I think some of it was predicated on trauma. The sexual abuse as a child was dissociative. So there was a whole onset of, I guess I'd call it neural diversity.
Children of trauma do have a closer connection to the spirit realm because they do sometimes leave their body.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So you've got a mentor. At what age do you have this mentor, and what is this mentor doing for you?
She was the mother of one of my friends in high school, and I was invited to go see what she does, quote unquote. They didn't tell me what she did, just come and see. And so I was, 16, 17, and she went into a trance and spoke beautiful, compassionate, self-loving words And so the work with her that I just kept going to see her for years, and the work was not just about predictive things, what was going to happen to me. It was a lot about how to self-love, how to self-nurture, and how to bring myself out of this trauma-induced state that I honestly didn't know I had at the time.
What age are you that you're to go see her over and over?
16 through 26.
Long time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd write down what she would predict, and then I'd write down what I thought it was, and then I'd go forward to see what it really was. So it was a really great study to understand the difference between what I hoped would happen from a prediction to what I actually did.
Do you know who she was channeling?
She always just said she was an antenna.
Okay.
And she had a big picture of Jesus behind her, so maybe she was thinking she was channeling Jesus, but I don't think she thought she was channeling. She just was an antenna.
Okay, so she really wasn't saying she was channeling, she just was a big antenna, and this was the information from the collective or something. That
we didn't even call it channeling.
Because channeling now is like, it's a mainstream term. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
You're studying with her. Is she helping you become more of a antenna?
Yes, not directly. She's not directly putting me in training to do that, but because of the combination of the music, and if you think about being in rock and roll, you're talking about being in a physical space of vibratory tones coming from within, not just the singing, but then surrounded by vibratory tone. Being in the sound, then going to her and receiving these lessons, I guess, suggestions, predictions, and then seeing them come about, the combination of the two is what really trained me. Because, like I said, channeling Einstein is a lot like writing music. But, yeah, there was no direct, here's how you do this.
We're talking with Barbara With, international peace activist, award-winning author, a psychic channel to Albert Einstein and the party, working in Afterlife for world peace. She is a ball of energy. We want to talk a little bit about when you start first channeling. You said you were doing some automatic writing. Let's talk a little bit about automatic writing and what that is.
Yes, automatic writing for me came about after years of working with my mentor, who was a psychic for me. So I was writing a letter to a friend, a rather snarky letter, I will admit, telling her how bad it was to make judgments. So there you go. And the energy in my hand shifted, and where I thought I was going, it went into a description of, yes, because when we make judgments, and they started using the word we, when we make judgments, like a lens of a camera, everything closes down and you can only see one small piece of the picture. So open up. We're waiting for you. As I said, because I knew what channeling was, I knew what this was, I was still like, okay, and I asked, who are you then? Because I thought it was an antenna. so who are you? And they said, we are sound. And at the time, this is 1987, I'm about 32 years old, and a real big mess. I thought, okay, fine, sound. I've been working with sound all my life. I'm an antenna. I pick up sound, and I beam it back to the human minds of the people who have come for readings. Yeah, I was okay with it.
So let's talk a little bit more with the automatic writing. Did you continue working with sound with that automatic writing?
I did. I, in fact, opened this gift up to anybody who was interested, and I would write at first. I wrote for about a year, so you would come and sit to my right, and I would just write answers to your questions. And after about a year, I decided I should step up and do what my mentor was able to do, which was to speak it. And so I was at a party one day, and I said, hey, everybody, do this experiment with me. I recently found out I'm a psychic, and I want to try to speak it. And the guy who was the most sarcastic, well, yeah, you're going to tell us all the secrets of the universe and stuff like that, And I said, you know what? You don't have to believe it, and I don't care because I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, but could you just not be snarky while I'm doing it? And he asked the most outrageous, intelligent questions. But I just closed my eyes and I took a breath, and it was like singing. It's like when I'm on stage and I close my eyes and take a breath, and up comes all this sound from somewhere in me, and it was just words. I mean, it wasn't just words, but it was words, and I don't remember what was said. We didn't record it, and I went around the room, and when I was done, I opened my eyes, and everyone was crying, and the guy who said the snarky things apologized, and that was really the beginning of my speaking as a psychic, a professional psychic.
How brave of you to do that. You had already been kind of practicing it a little behind the scenes before you got to that party, I'm assuming?
I was writing.
Okay, so just writing. That was your first time ever speaking it?
Yes.
Oh, really brave. Where are you going from here after this party? Take us a little bit on a journey.
I offered my services to two of my dear friends, more than two of them, but specifically my two dear friends. And I said, Jane and Bruce, and I said, if this helps you and you think it might help somebody else, tell them I'll do this for $25. And that's how I started, and that's how I got clients. And for a long time, I charged $25, and you'd come over. And by that time, we had a recording device. Unlike when I started getting readings, we had to bring somebody to write for us because there weren't even tape recorders that you could carry. Yeah, and it grew from, that was 1988 maybe, and it grew exponentially, and it was all referral. So somebody would get referred to me, and there was a series of people who were referred by the same therapist I'd never met, and Mim Pugh in Minneapolis. And they said, well, she sends us here, and we get the recording, and then we go back to our sessions, and we use it.
You're talking about a counselor.
Yeah, a psychologist in Minneapolis. Her name was Mim Pugh. I've never did get to meet her before she died, but she sent me all these clients because it's so much about the psyche. And you can, and as we go on with the story, you'll see how this fits in. Like I said in the beginning, how to have a thriving life, how to love yourself, how to maneuver through some of the crappy things that happen in life, more empowered.
She would say, okay, I'm going to send you to Barbara, chat with her, come back, bring your recording, let's dive through this. What were they looking for?
Well, unbeknownst to me at the time, this was really laying the groundwork for Einstein's unified field, a map of human consciousness. Because if we jump way ahead to that years later, what he explained and what he brought forth through my channeling of him was not just a map, we call them the three human dimensions: intuition, intellect, and emotion. And a way that they align so that we're working for the good of the whole, that we're working on intuition rather than intellect, and it's the system. So back then, I think what was happening, even though I didn't know at the time, because I didn't never talk to anybody about it. I would never sit down and listen to their tape with them and tell them what it meant. I would send them out the door. But they were talking about how, you're in your head so much that you're killing yourself or you're hurting yourself, or you have all this deep abscess of emotion. You have to somehow feel and breathe it out, and deal with. So there was beginning inklings into what has become conflict revolution and all of that work. But I can only think that people were getting help because they kept coming back. Sustaining
supporters. They were coming back.
Exactly.
When you're going into your work, do you remember what you're saying, or do you understand what you're saying? Because I've heard some people have to go back and re-listen to their tape of what they channeled for the person.
I am pretty much fully present during the reading, and can, after the reading, have a halfway intelligent conversation for how much you can remember. There's so much information that somebody gets when they get a reading, and it lasts for years. So, and it's meant to unfold sort of time released as well, because it's such a big information dump. But I don't remember because I do so many readings.
Let's say you had a session today, this morning, you get done with your client, you'll know what you were saying during that process.
Yes, talk about past lives and this means, but much more than I did in the beginning.
I want to talk a little bit about, of course, your books that you have. I want to talk about the channeling Albert Einstein. So you're going through this process. You're done automatic writing. You're now into your psychic work, your channeling. You had not written your book yet while you were still seeing these clients. Is that correct? Your first book?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. Channeling began in 1987, and it was in 1993. So, what is that, 7 years? I got this idea that I wanted to do a group. Because what would these voices, which were the voices of we, even though I was an antenna, apparently there was more energy, whatever. And what would they say to a group of people? And even though I had done that first group, it was such the first time, and nobody recorded it. But so I called up everybody, all my clients, and not a one of them were interested. And I was kind of surprised, but then in May of that year, in 1993, a referral came from Teresa McMillan. And when she came, she then referred 5 or 6 other women, and that eventually her best friend, Kim, came later in the fall. And when Kim came and she took her recording, she went home and transcribed it and started to call me up and say, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? No one had ever, in all of those 7 years, done that for me. Kim and Teresa started stalking me. We laughed because I was playing at a restaurant in Minneapolis, and they'd come on the breaks, and we'd just talk about everything. And it was so exciting. And at the same time, I was thinking, oh, my gosh, here's this group. They were having the conversation, we got to get the whole group together and get Barb over here. And that was how I did my very first group in December of 1993. And from there, everything else has transpired.
Why you, Barbara? Why do you think you were chosen? You know, I mean, do you believe that all of us have this ability? Is that correct?
I do.
And some are connected more. What do you get from that information? Why is some connected more and some aren't?
You know, I think it's individual. I call it mathematics. We come into this life with, I believe, a certain amount of set things. I'm a woman. I was born at this date. These were my parents. Those are immutable things in life. And then there's a whole bunch of other energy that comes in from all sorts of places, whether it's other lives, childhood, the energy of the earth. There's so much energy. And everybody has their own path to walk. They have their own set of circumstances that they're learning, because we're all here on this learning journey. And it's so unique that everyone's is designed for them. Now, why me? I often ask that in some of the lowest points of my life. Like, why? This is crazy to think that I'm channeling Einstein. It really has been crazy. But I had to ask myself, well, why Barbara Walters? Right? Remember Barbara Walters?
Yeah, Barbara.
Well, why? Does she ask herself, why me? Maybe, but I have often said, why me? And then there came a time I went to see a psychic at a psychic fair, and she was really funny, big Rasta hair and a big bosom, and she dropped her mic straight down her blouse, and they said they were bringing me the one who channeled Einstein, and I thought, what is Einstein doing at this rinky-dink rock and angel fair in Cincinnati, Ohio? But now that I see you, I understand, because Einstein didn't come back to give us the mathematical formulas. He came back to touch the everyday people and to speak in a language that they can understand. Mm. And why you? Why not you? Look at you. You're crazy enough. You've got energy. You've been specially trained by the music. And so I happen to believe, though, that I volunteered and was chosen. That's what they told us in the beginning when the groups were doing it. I was doing triad work. They said, you volunteered for this life, and you were chosen to take this mission forward.
And that is why you. That is why.
Yeah.
What is triad work?
Well, when I started to do groups with Kim and Teresa, that was the beginning of my first book. The first book was Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels, because one of the things we were being told in our channeling sessions, which I did triad sessions with the three of us and then the big group sessions, was that we had to write down everything while it was happening. So we kept diaries, and we wrote the bulk of this book, and it really covers a span from December 93 till the end of February 94. But it's all the transcripts from the channeling, all the transcripts from our triad groups, and as we were putting these pieces together, how we were changing and what was going on with us. So that was the first book that we put out in 1997.
Give us a little synopsis of Diaries of a Psychic Sorority.
This was the setup. To keep in mind that this wasn't just a one-off experience, that we were being set up to eventually allow me to speak to Einstein in the party and bring forth what I did. So, but we didn't know any of that. We had started to hold these groups, and we'd record them and transcribe them. And when we, as a triad, would get together, the first group the three of us had, the girls said, "Who are you?" And I'm thinking to myself, well, there's sound, and I'm an antenna. And they said, "You can call us angels." And my skepticism kicked in because there'd never been anything outside of me. And what does that mean? Angels. My idea of angels was Doreen virtue, and everything was, sweet and airy-fairy. And that wasn't what I felt like we were doing, but whatever. Okay, we'll call you angels. And these angels said that they had this theoretical process that they were developing, that they would be the answer to world peace, starting one person at a time, and that they needed humans to test this theory of theirs on with real conflicts to see if it would work. And we apparently volunteered and were chosen for such a mission. And in Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, you can see as we write down, like after we're told that, and Kim, who was a very conservative businesswoman, she wasn't woo-woo at all. And she's like, what? I'm supposed to lead a movement of some kind? So, but then we eventually had our first fight. And by golly, if we didn't cycle around and get that transcript and bring it out, and I read one sentence, and it said, "If you are emotionally engaged in a conflict, the root of your part is within you." In that moment, all three of us just gasped, and everything shifted. And I came back to the table and started pointing at Kim, saying, "Well, you need to do this and that." It's like, here's what I can do. Here's what I need to look at. She did the same thing.
This is Kim and Teresa, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're not psychic, correct?
No.
Okay. So they're just the ones writing down and asking questions to you, and you're pulling things through. Okay.
Yeah, it is really the root of all the work that has come. And I believe that this was Einstein in disguise with his party. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of divinity within this as well. It was monumental. And when we did that, when we each had that experience at the table and had this amazing result, I went off to work that night at the club, and there was a waitress there who wanted nothing to do with me. She was so cold the whole stint of my whole stay. And I walked in that bar, and she could not get enough of me. "Oh, Barbara, do you like Patti Smith? I've got some cassettes I could give you." And put $20 in my tip jar, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is what these angels are talking about. You affect a change, not going at the arena in which it's been created. You change it in yourself first, and it naturally manifests something different outside us.
What a beautiful concept. I'm going to just jump back a little bit. You have a conflict with the girls that you're doing this triad work with.
Yes.
Instead of pointing fingers, you're hearing the conflict is within you.
Mm-hmm.
Now you go back, you kind of go back, okay, what is my part? What do I do to clean up? You clean it up with the girls. The girls are everybody's like having their own part, cleaning it up. The things that were conflict feeling up against you, it sounds like they're now melting away.
Yes. And it happened for Kim and Teresa in different ways, having to do with their families, having to do with their ex-husbands, just the synchronicity that started to get created as we continued to do this, because that was only the first of many conflicts. So we've been specially trained quite extensively in how if and how this works. And that's what the angels said they wanted to do. Is this going to work? And it did.
What a valuable piece just to get and then just have that clarity. And now you're moving forward. We are talking with Barbara With, international peace activist, award-winning author, psychic channel to Albert Einstein and the party, working in Afterlife for world peace. Barbara, a couple more questions before we take our break. Where do you guys start to write this book, Take All Your Diaries? When does that happen? Because you're 93 with the girls.
It starts in 1994. It starts in that January. And what happened was Kimberly had a kitchen design business, and Teresa had come on board to work with her in the business, and her office was a mile from my house. So we did a lot of work at her office. I would bring my little iMac in, or my little cube in, and we'd sit around the computer, and we would write together. We would write because there's a lot of parts in diaries that are our voices. There's my voice and Kim's voice and Teresa's voice and the angels' voices, but there's also our voices. So we wrote the bulk of it while it was going on, and then it took us another many years for it to be done, and we actually re-released it in 2019 with a new introduction to it as well. But yeah, it took us a while. Every time we would go back to edit the story about the first fight, we'd have a fight.
Of course you did. Just to remind you.
Yes, exactly. More tests.
And you just had 30th anniversary of the book last year. I mean, who knew that this was going to be where you were 30 years ago?
Oh, my gosh. I can't even tell you how many times to this day. And because it's gotten more and more and more and more, it isn't just, let's listen to some voices. Suddenly it's Einstein and the unified field theory. And I just came from the Science of Consciousness conference in Tucson with the University of Arizona, Tucson, with all the major scientists. So who knew? Who knew?
Well, let's take our break. We're talking to Barbara With, international peace activist, award-winning author, and psychic channel to Albert Einstein and the party, working in Afterlife for world peace. We're going to chat when we come back about Albert Einstein and the party and Barbara. We'll be right back with Barbara With. We are talking with Barbara With, international peace activist, award-winning author, and psychic channel to Albert Einstein and the party, working in Afterlife for world peace. The Diaries of the Psychic Sorority. So it comes out in 1997. Where does the channeling Albert Einstein, where does that come in?
When our book came out, we made a decision to self-publish, but also to see if we could get a literary agent to shop it to a bigger publishing company. So I got a literary agent, and one day she called me up and said she had a call from a tabloid in London, like a paranormal tabloid, Jesus on the Toast and all that. And they were looking for an interview with Princess Diana from Beyond the Grave on the 1-year anniversary of her death. And I was skeptical again because I thought, really, a paranormal tabloid? That's where I'm going with my art? And I've never done such a thing. I learned that I could speak with people who had passed on. We were talking to the angels, but then I had all of these experiences of Teresa's mother showing up and other things. So I knew I could do it, but I'd never gone to a dead person and said, "Can I interview you?" But being who I am, I was curious enough, and I sat down and I channeled both the questions and the answers by typing. And then I printed it out, and I went to read it, and I wept. It was like, really? This just came out of me? I could hear her voice in my ear as I read. And very detailed about her relationship with Dodie, like what happened that night. But the whole gist of her message was, if everybody who had put flowers in front of the palace after I died would make peace in this way, we would have world peace. The tabloid flew me out to New York and spent 5 hours with me, and they didn't want it. Well, it became the first chapter in my next book, Party of 12, The Afterlife Interviews. The agent and I said, well, maybe there's other famous dead people who want to talk. So I made this big list. Some did, some didn't. But the next one up in the queue was Nicole Brown Simpson. Very eye-opening.
And what information did you get out of that?
that, too, was very profound for me. I thought you died and you went to peaceful afterlife. No, she's not at peace. And she did a very in-depth explanation of OJ and how the psychological condition evolved from the time he was young, and how he had real resentment of white people, and yet white people were the avenue that was going to get him where he wanted to go. And so she became the whipping girl for the aggression that he couldn't get out on the white males, perhaps, who were building his career with him and what have you. And she talked all about the trial and the death and her kids and how hard it was to sit there and watch him with them. But, whatever, here we go. She was teaching us about forgiveness, I think, was her big challenge.
Can I ask you, when you're channeling a celebrity, are you going to your spirit guide, to the angels, and then the angels are calling them over? How is this working for you, and how do you hear them? Do you hear them? Do you feel them?
Mostly, in this case, I went to them, used my imagination, closed my eyes, got in that space where I write music, that non-physical space, and imagined them there and saying, Elvis, do you want to do an interview? And having Elvis say, nope, you know what, I'm getting in too much trouble as it is. Or Nicole Brown Simpson, yes. And then she would step up. And I think most of them in Party of 12, I'd say the majority of them, I would speak it and record it and transcribe it, except for Diana, Jesus, and maybe one other one I typed.
And you can hear them, like you and I?
Yes. Just get my ego out of the way and open my mouth and speak. And then when it's all done and we listen back to it and transcribe it is where the proof, I think, is in the pudding. I can hear it. I read it back and hear stuff I didn't hear at all.
Okay. Tell me how you can get your ego out of the way. What would be the easiest thing for someone if they were trying to being an antenna? What would you suggest to help them?
First of all, to go into a meditation. It doesn't have to be extensive. It can just be sitting in that chair, turning your focus inward, getting your thoughts away from the details of life that's going on. And then what I do is I picture my ego shrunk down, a little tiny me, and I put her in a chair, a little rocking chair, and I set her off in the corner. And she still talks during reading. She'll still say stuff like, you can't tell them that. You don't know that's true. But it's so tiny, and it's so little. And then that leaves this sort of cavernous space. If you think about being outside at night with the beautiful sky that seems to go on forever, you create this cavernous space, and then you listen in that space. And I would say, for me, even though it's an external sort of picture of being in this open space, within me, then the flow comes up from my solar plexus up through my heart and then out of my throat, rather than originating in my head where my ego sits.
Did someone teach you? Where'd you come up?
I'm a self-taught gal all the way, from music to this, to everything. I like to self-teach, so it was my own.
So go into now you're channeling celebrities. Where are you putting these celebrities' information?
Did all 12 interviews in a month, pretty much what our focus was in the start. And we started out with a big list, and then people disqualified themselves, like Elvis and Mother Teresa. And then, but by the time John Kennedy, we went to him and said, hey, do you want to be interviewed? He's like, yeah. And he did this spectacular interview that affirms everything we've learned in the past 5 years or whatever. But he said to us at the end, he said, okay, you're done with the list. We are going to tell you who's coming up next, because there's 12 of us here, and we've written this book, and we want you to publish it.
So John's telling you what to do.
Yes, he's telling us what to do. You're going to do this. And so then came Jackie, and then came Einstein.
Wow.
He wasn't even on our original list. And when I channeled him with voice, this was not only the voice of every reading I'd ever done, it was the voice of sound. And it was so familiar that it stretched all the way back into music. And, Einstein was a musician as well. I immediately, because of that channel, my life changed. It's like, oh my gosh. And I started to put the pieces together, back, flip, 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 flip. Angels. Oh, you can call us angels. Well, let me just tell you quick. After the first fight that we had, we were doing a channel like the next day, and they were praising us, saying they had filed into the room and they were all watching us. And when we cycled around and actually tested their theory, they raised their beer glasses. And at the time, I thought, I made this mental note. The angels drink beer? When I realized he had been with me my whole life and he was part of this whole freaking plan, I thought, German.
Exactly. Can you list who the 12 interviews are in the book, The Party 12?
Okay. Diana, Johnny Versace, which he did a really incredible interview about that industry of modeling and its effect upon culture, etc. John Kennedy, Jackie, Einstein, Freud, Hitler, Nicole Brown Simpson, Anwar Sadat, Ryan White. He was a young man in the 80s who was one of the first people to die of AIDS from a blood transfusion. It was very culturally relevant. And Jesus of Nazareth, the man. Norma Jean Baker. Yeah,
Aww.
She gave us some great insights. So we had these interviews. It took a month, and that was in 1998. We had it, and I wasn't publishing it, and then in 1999, John Kennedy Jr. died. And he came to me and my agent, because she was also psychic. And so he does the introduction, and he explains how the Party of 12 all came together in Afterlife. And then I published it June of 2001. And then in September, when September 11th came, it kind of all made more sense in a way, like these people were in Afterlife working for world peace. In 1999, world peace was a really sweet idea.
2001 comes, boom. We are talking with Barbara With, international peace activist, award-winning author, psychic channel to Albert Einstein and the Party, working in Afterlife for world peace. Tell me a little bit about Einstein. Your first time with Einstein. Walk me back through that.
The information was really accessible and understandable and basic, and it was all kinds of things having to do with, I think, probably the creation of matter, but also about, like, he talked about ADHD being a disease of the parent, because in real life, it's like the indigenous people. Your child would run around outside for 8 hours a day, not be forced to sit in a little desk. He talked about reincarnation in a completely new way that was really setting us up for the whole concurrent lives thing that he brought out later. But it's really enlightening and inspiring. And because of it, I thought, I want to do a little book just with Einstein. I want to just do a book with him. I don't know what he's going to say, but I love him so much. So in 2005 was the 100-year anniversary of the miracle year of E=mc². I thought, okay, let's do this. So I channeled a bunch of 6-7 sessions, transcribed them, and sat down that winter to edit. And much in the same mind-blowing fashion as the angels telling us they had this process they wanted to test, he gave me a unified field theory, which was something that he did not do in life. And it included these maps of human consciousness, which is how our human consciousness interacts with energy to manifest matter. And then the real mind-blowing one was he gave a scientific, quantifiable definition of compassion, with a capital C, as the fifth fundamental force of the universe, the creative intelligence that uses the four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time. And then he went on to explain it all, and we drew these rudimental maps, and it was his theory, his proof of why conflict revolution works, why the work that the angels taught us to do, why it works, why you can manifest in the lens something completely different without ever going at it. And so that was you have to understand the psychological challenges of these things, because it sounds all nice and good on paper, but when he's telling me the void, the source of everything, is in the center of the earth, and it operates like a black hole. And I know nothing about science. And I say, so I'm supposed to go out in the world and tell everybody there's a black hole in the center of the planet, and that's where we all originate. Really? Oh, my God.
Thank you, Albert, for giving me this responsibility. Wow.
I volunteered and was chosen.
Yep. You volunteered. Let's talk about the conflict revolution. What is it?
Really a revolutionary process, and it started back with the angels, that first fight that we had, and we kept working it and kept getting miraculous results. I was a contracted employee at some nonprofit, and they were having so much conflict, and I went to the president and said, look, I've got this new thing, and I'd love to be able to try it. Would you give me a chance to do a workshop with staff development? And she's like, yeah. So I sat down and laboriously, painstakingly made it into a process. It wasn't just a thing that the three of us were doing. And I gave the first workshop in 1999, and I've been training it ever since. And what the basic different premises is, when you're talking about conflict resolution, and you think about, okay, there's two parties and they have a conflict, and you have to understand how they feel, and they have to articulate their needs, and then you have to negotiate. There's all this stuff that it's not that anywhere near that. It starts with self, and it's based on these maps of human consciousness that were delivered to us, that there's these three human dimensions: emotion, intuition, and intellect, and they work to create this human psyche that allows us to have this human experience. And when we align them to compassion, as we call it, and there's specific ways to do that, then we create peace first and foremost within us, and then that naturally is projected into the lens, the physical world, where everything is being manifested and separated. It naturally has an impact on what manifests in the physical world.
So this is basically, it's kind of the basic of manifestation. It's like the rule in some sense. So it's emotion, intellect, and what's the other one? Intuition. Okay. And then you align it with compassion.
Very basically, the map, if we're looking at the map, you're looking at a particle or the earth, because it's unified. It's the way our compilations of consciousness act, and also the planet. And from the center of the earth to the surface of the earth is a gravitational wave that's carrying all of the mathematics that are going to be your experience as a human on the surface of the earth in the lens, where all that math gets separated out and it gets projected and perceived by your physical body. But that wave continues on into the heavens until it hooks up with the Earth's electromagnetic field. And it gets pulled back up through the North Pole, back into the center of the planet, and then it begins again, and it spins at the speed of light squared.
Wow.
So what is in your compilation of consciousness, we call it, all the math in the source surrounded by this membrane domain that is you, is going to get projected into the lens as the whole universe. And that gravitational wave from the surface, or from the center of the earth to the surface, this is where these three human dimensions exist. And you can't see them, but you can see how they manifest. They're on the gravitational wave, and they're your human part that's interacting with the other four fundamental forces to create the physical body, and then the physical body projects and perceives the whole universe in that lens. And so while you can't see what's going on from the center of the earth to the surface of the earth, you can see what's manifesting around you. So you can see the conflicts manifesting. And what you're triggered by in a conflict is, if you're emotionally engaged in a conflict, the root of your part is within you. So we begin to interpret what you're triggered by, because, people aren't triggered by the same thing. You can have an experience with someone and your best friend can be totally triggered by them. And you're just thinking, well, no, I don't know. Because that's our clue to revolve our focus off of the person that's triggering us or the situation and back into this non-physical world of emotion, intuition, and intellect. And when we change it there, it naturally manifests different outcomes. Because it's a perfect system. It perfectly projects from the source to the lens, whatever on that wave, whatever mass is on that wave. And that's why there can be wars and conflict, and it's still a perfect system.
We are talking with Barbara With, international peace activist, award-winning author, and psychic channel to Albert Einstein and the party working in Afterlife for world peace. If I have a conflict with someone, I'm just making stuff up right now, and they just kind of trigger me. They just kind of annoy me. That really is inside me, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. And to get to that peace, that root peace of what that is that's triggering me, where would I go from there?
Yeah, very basically is we create what we call sound bites, because you know how the intellect and the ego can go run off in imagination and project. And so we try to identify what is it about that person very specifically that triggers you. Well, they don't respect me, or they're always late, or you come up with something. Now, this is your sound bite. Okay, we're not saying that person isn't doing that. First of all, I'm not saying that they might be treating you terrible, but you bring it in and revolve it back to yourself, and this is your soundbite. And we create what we call the witness, which is what some people might consider an observer, but we call it the witness. So we get up every day. I do this every day. I get up, I say my prayer of gratitude, I set my intention for the day, and if I'm conflicted, here's my soundbite. Now I'm going to observe where I am not respecting myself, or where I am not respecting somebody else, or where I am screwing with time in some fashion. Doesn't excuse the other person, but that is not your domain. You have no control over that person. And if the trigger is there for you and you come back in and then you do this like honestly and openly to say, wait a minute, where am I? And you have that aha moment where you see yourself actually perpetrating the thing that you're so bugged by somebody else, it is the most powerful, rudimental kind of change that you can have. It just is. Nobody shows it to you. You are voluntarily becoming the change. You are wanting to be a part of the world peace, so you're going to look for these things. And when you find them, you go back there, and I'll guarantee you that person is either risen to the occasion or they disappear.
And if all of us do this and figure these pieces out inside of ourselves, that's how world peace comes.
Yes. And the beautiful part about this whole plan, my whole lifetime plan to bring this information, is that in the world today, 2024, everybody wants to talk about peace. Everybody wants to know what they can do. They feel so helpless. But with this, what I say in my World Peace Tour, I left last July, and I've been on my World Peace Tour until probably I die. I'm looking for the participation of the willing to take part in a worldwide nonviolent action to end the age of war. Because every time one person, even yourself, like on this conversation, the next time you're in a conflict and you go out there and you think, I'm going to try this, and you have your miraculous little result, you don't have to join a group. You don't have to give money. You don't have to. Those are all nice things to do. But if we all did this, and then you start to see on a smaller level how things manifest differently, and peace manifests through your alignment to compassion. I've seen miracles take place on the microcosm. I truly believe this would have such a powerful effect. And it doesn't have to be conflict resolution either. It's just a basic understanding that this work that you do, like this is the key. Don't underestimate this work that all of us, conflict resolution is just a universal reflection of what everybody does to try to meditation and energy work and everything that we're doing to try to bring ourselves into alignment, don't underestimate how important that work is.
And the peace is there. And I love that. We're talking to Barbara With, international peace activist, award-winning author, and psychic channel to Albert Einstein and the party, working in Afterlife for world peace. Barbara, do you teach? Do you have classes?
I do teach it. I haven't had a class in a while, but I have developed an online class. I'm also working on a downloadable course that it's just taking me a while. I've been traveling so much. But I also do it in person. I've been doing it around the world since probably 2007 when I started to really travel and teach and train with it. And I do one-on-one coaching with it, so it's really powerful that way. But yes.
You mentioned adding the compassion to it.
Well, in this case, in the unified field theory, the scientific definition of compassion with capital C, as the fifth fundamental force, it has three different effects upon energy. Okay, so one thing like a compass that draws circles. Compassion is this mysterious intelligence that impels energy to step out of the void, out of nothing, and into the everything, and create this electromagnetic circular boundary around the mathematics that are going to be you and your world. The beginning stage of separating out the everything into separation. The second thing it does is like a compass that aligns to true north. It aligns all these compilations, which are in the center of the earth now, to true north. So we're all on the same map. When that gravitational wave leaves the center of the earth and goes to the surface, we all have the same map. And the third thing it does is more traditionally like what you're talking about, but it's just this absolute recognition that we're all one. And it's in our bodies to know that we're all one organism, and it infuses our consciousness with that knowledge.
I'm just in awe right now. I feel like this sounds so weird, but I feel like I'm going to cry. I'm like,
I know.
Because I feel so connected. This is just so beautiful. And I feel like I got a little aha moment tonight. And this is amazing. So thank you. Barbara, where are we going to find more of you?
I live in northern Wisconsin, and I left my home last October, and I've been traveling around on my World Peace Tour. I went through Duluth and Minneapolis speaking engagements and channeling, and I went down to Georgia. And then I went to the UK for most of the winter. And then I came back and I drove from Georgia to Tucson, where I had a very small speaking part in the Science of Consciousness conference, which was a bunch of far, far left brain people intermingled with the spiritual people. But I was able to give my third book, Imagining Einstein, Essays on M-Theory, World Peace, and the Science of Compassion, that came out of that 2005 session, to Deepak Chopra.
Oh, wow.
I said, I've been impelled to give this to you and tell you to read it. And he looked me in the eye and said, I will read it.
And he always holds up to his word. So
I know. I'm so excited. Kind of traveling through, I went up through Taos, and I've been doing some hot springs. I'm way up in Silt, Colorado right now, but I'm on my way back to my island.
Are you taking any clients for readings, or are you just doing the World Peace Tour?
I am available for readings. The best place to go for that is barbarawith.com. That's my very personal website. And I've got a bunch of other stuff going on. I'm an investigative journalist. I'm also doing this series on propaganda and about how to dismantle the propaganda of today's world. And oddly enough, Conflict Revolution has always been about that, about how to train ourselves not to listen to the propaganda in our intellect. So, but then, I'll be shifting gears and heading out again at the end of the summer to continue the Peace Tour.
Do you have any Texas on your radar? We're in Wimberley, close to Austin.
I love Wimberley, and yes, Texas. I was down there last fall. I did a whole weekend series in Austin, stayed in Wimberley. I'd love to come down there. And I am very much a living room type of channel. I love to have small group. Not to say that I won't do bigger channels than I have done, but as I travel, I just I love watching people like you.
Yeah.
This is what happens all the time. It's like ping, 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 ping. You start to see it's so easy. It's so simple. It's hard to do, but it just makes so much sense.
Let me know so I can let everybody know when you will be here. BarbaraWith.com is where people can connect up and have private readings.
And then SynergyAlliance.LLC. That's the publishing company, and that's the whole story. The diaries, all the books are over there, and you can get there from my website.
Well, I'm excited. Thank you so much for sharing this amazing information, this really, truly honest, authentic person. So I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing out there for us. And thank you, Einstein, for connecting to you. And thank you for signing up for all of this before you even came to this earth. So
Thank you.
Barbara With, and you're listening to Open the Eye with Tanya Tyler.